Okay, I would like to call this meeting to order, and if we could please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we have the roll call, please.
Councilmember Anstandig?
Here.
Councilmember Rogers?
Here.
Councilmember Turner?
Here.
Councilmember Wilsheimer?
Here.
And Mayor Craig?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any changes to the orders of the day?
I'll join the current meeting.
Everybody in?
On tonight's meeting.
Yeah, I hit the
we're good.
join.
All right.
I didn't join the first time.
I'll join you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, we are at oral communications. At this point, any member of the public who would like to speak on any item that is not on the agenda or on an item not on the agenda, and we have Mr. Brian Mekachuk. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, Brian Mekachuk, 17509 via Sereno. I just wanted to come here tonight and let you know that I am Monte Sereno's representative on the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Customer Advisory Board. And I've attended 3 meetings, and our 4th meeting is tomorrow. And what we're doing is this group has been formed, and it'll go through until, I believe, September. And it's basically to solicit community input into the programs that they plan to offer. So I know that Mayor Craig is the Monte Sereno's official member on the board of directors, but I was named onto the customer advisory board. So it's kind of an outreach, and I just wanted to give the council an understanding of that's what I'm doing, and I'll probably come to the city and maybe ask to use this room so I can solicit community involvement. And all of the individual representatives of the 16 different communities will be doing that. So I just thought I'd let you know. I don't know if you've got any questions or comments for me.
Any questions or comments? No, but I would like to thank you very much for stepping up and doing this. And we think it's a great organization and is really going to do a lot of good in the Valley. So
I was very surprised. I didn't really understand exactly how it worked. And they put us through, 4 hours of training. And it's kind of an interesting organization. But I'll be coming back with some outreach to the other members of the community. Okay.
You'll probably be ready in a career in power management and Cal ISO and all of the other acronyms. This organization has more acronyms than you can imagine, and more legislation than any other board I've ever had to deal with. So,
Yep. Okay.
PG&E is constantly working to shut these CCAs down. CCAs being the community choice aggregates. So, okay. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, are there any written communications? I don't have any.
There are none.
Very good. Okay, so our consent calendar is the next item.
Before the city council considers the consent calendar, I just wanted to let you know item number 5, the financial statement, the audit for fiscal year ending June 30th. We do have one of the partners of the organization that assisted us with compiling that. Mr. Ahmad Garibay has come tonight in case there were any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do any members wish to pull any items from the consent calendar, or do they have any questions? Okay. Are there any members of the public that have any comments on the consent calendar? And seeing none, I would like to have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
Okay.
Isn't something supposed to come up here?
It
So
didn't.
we're not getting the motion buttons.
It didn't, so. The old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yep, hold on.
Jump the council.
We're working out a few kinks. You're watching our inaugural run of our new electronic public display system.
I was looking
iPads
for
are motionless.
But there are no buttons.
No motion.
I don't,
Already our first glitch.
you know,
The bug.
going through this again in some.
That's for the new budget. This is the.
No,
I wouldn't do this with my business.
We are still motionless.
All right, well, let's just do it the old-fashioned way to start.
Yeah.
We have a motion?
It was moved.
We have a motion and we have a second. Let's see if we can get the vote up.
Seconder?
yes. No, here.
Councilmember Rogers.
You're right. I thought maybe.
No voting yet.
No voting yet.
Do you have them all organized?
Burton, is it too late to ask a question of our auditor?
Sure, go ahead.
I just would like to know, since we haven't really had a lot of time, like, at all to take a look at this, if there's anything extraneous on this that that you could tell us about. I know that's a very broad topic, but I'd kind of like to know, in your opinion, things that were unusual from years past, anything that really stands out to you on here.
No, nothing unusual. The accounting industry for governments is changing. I know you previously funded the pension liability. There is a new standard very similar to pensions. It's for health insurance related to retirees. That's another standard that is changing. There are a few standards that are out there that are impacting these financial statements and how the amounts are presented on the financial statements. And based upon that, various decisions are being made based on these newly presented numbers. For example, one of the significant changes is related to pensions. And not so much that it's impacting you, although it will probably impact you, is CalPERS. CalPERS, with the implementation of the new pension standards, which is the administrator of your pension plan, is re-evaluating these numbers again one more time and is asking local governments to contribute more in pension contributions. So as you process payroll, you're sending them a wire for your pensions. Accounting standards changed a few years ago. It brought in a significant amount of attention to these, newly presented numbers. They were previously in the back of the report. Now they are in the front page of the report. These are the major changes. For Monte Sereno, I've got other cities in there that are significantly impacted by these changes. But in your case, you don't have safety. It's all contracted out. The utilities are all contracted out. It's not something that you do. So really, in your financial statements, it's fairly simple. Nothing that will significantly impact you. But yeah, some of the stuff in there will change.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good question. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
But this one, we'll just take a normal vote, and I'm not sure what's wrong, but hopefully with the next item, it'll be
Okay. Great.
So it was moved by Councilmember Ann Standig, seconded by Councilmember Turner.
Rogers.
Rogers.
And you can enter the vote, just for this one, hopefully.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We'll give you a minute to record the vote.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, so passes 5-0.
Okay, so now we are on item number 6, which is establishment of a planned development zoning district. And we will start off with a staff report. Seeing our expert city planner getting ready.
It's just this once. Eventually, we will have this all organized.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. It's my pleasure to be before you this evening to present a proposed ordinance that would establish a planned development zoning district for the city of Monte Sereno. As presented in the staff report, the city currently has what is typically referred to as conventional zoning districts. Those are our R1 single-family districts, R18, R120, R144. We also have an RM, which allows multifamily and public and whatnot. So those, as I said, typically referred to as conventional zoning districts. And in the municipal code, you'll see the established standards for setbacks, height, parking, and whatnot. A planned development zoning district is a zoning district which offers some flexibility in tailoring development standards. We do have a process flow chart back there which helps you understand really just the practical difference between a conventional zoning district and a planned development. All zoning districts have to be consistent with the city's general plan. Being a general law city, you have to have the two consistent. So whether it's a conventional zoning district or a planned development zoning district, if your general plan says there's a certain density promoted on a site, either of those zoning district tools have to be consistent with that. As you all are aware, we do have applications on file to look at development of the Hacienda site. This planned development ordinance before you today has nothing to do with that specific development. What it does do is create a tool to which we can look at that development and help to design some flexible development standards to better accommodate the proposed density, which again has to happen through a general plan amendment on that site. So given some constraints with the scenic corridor and the oak woodland, how can we best cluster development and tailor development standards to support that type of development on the site. As you've read in the staff report, the presentation of a planned development zoning comes through a general development plan. So instead of the development standards actually finding their way into the municipal code, it's a standalone document that lives with that site. And the document itself will be pretty much designed consistent with how we present development standards for the other zoning districts. We'll identify the uses allowed, any conditional uses, setbacks, parking standards, and any other relevant development standards that may need to deviate from the standard that's in the municipal code, as well as how we have it in conventional zoning districts and the requirement for site development permit with a lot of the development. So goes a planned development zoning. Any time there's a project that has a planned development zoning, in order to take advantage of that zoning and those standards, a planned development permit. So conventional districts, a majority of the development may require a site development permit. In a planned development zoning district, again, you're going to always require a development permit, hence referred to a planned development permit. What we've proposed in this ordinance, which is different from the conventional zoning districts, is the planned development permit would go to you, the city council, as the decision-making body. And let me step back. The plan development zoning action itself, since it's a legislative action, would be at the discretion of the council. And you would be the body determining whether or not you want to consider, even consider a plan development zoning on a site or not. Should you support one, it would then come back before you with the specific development and refined development design through a plan development permit, which would need to happen before it can then come into us through building permits. Trying to think. That pretty much lays it out. In the ordinance, we do limit the opportunity for sites to take advantage of this tool to sites that are 4 acres or larger. There are a few of those within the city. But again, it doesn't mean that they have an as-of-right ability to do a plan development zoning. You know, if the council were to feel that one of the conventional districts was just fine, you know, you can make that decision that there really is no practical need for a plan development zoning on one of those larger sites. So with that, I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? We'll start over. We have Councilmember Turner.
You got it?
I got it.
Oh, good. So I have a question, and I'm bringing this up because I saw a post on Nextdoor, and the post said that this planned development is really a precursor to having commercial development in Monte Sereno. And I wanted to verify that or negate it.
So I can answer that. So the city has an adopted general plan land use diagram, and the land use that has been approved throughout city is residential. There are no commercial land uses identified for the city of Monte Sereno. So therefore, you know, you cannot do a zoning which would allow anything other than what the general plan has set out there, which is residential. And it has to be at the density that's on the general plan, unless that is amended.
So then, for example, if somebody acquired 4 acres of property along Winchester and said, man, this is a great spot to put a 7-Eleven, and they took it to the desk at City Hall, would they immediately be told right there that our general plan does not allow any commercial development in the city? So at that point, their request or their I'll just call it their preliminary investigation would be done, or would it end up being something that would come all the way to the council, or would it just be something that they would probably just go to the courts and try to get us to change the general plan through the courts?
I think unless directed otherwise by the city attorney, staff would reject that at the counter. But again.
So that's correct. We would not accept an application that was not consistent with the general plan. And even with a planned development district, if they were proposing that, they could not propose a commercial use because we don't allow commercial uses within the city. The only thing they could do would be to come to the city council, perhaps in public comment time, and ask for you to consider creating a commercial general plan designation. But short of that, no commercial uses would be allowed.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's hold off. We're gonna have a time for questions and comments later on. We're gonna let the council get their first crack at these guys. Okay? Thanks. Okay. Oh, you did pop up, Councilmember Wilsheimer.
Thank you. Could you or maybe our city lawyer clarify the term "no right to issuance," which is in the ordinance?
So as Ms. Hamilton mentioned, this is basically you're modifying the zoning district for a particular property. That's a legislative act, and that is within the sole discretion of the city council. So there is no right for anyone to obtain a planned development district unless the city council determines it's appropriate. So nothing guarantees that anyone would be entitled to a planned development district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Ann Standing.
Yep. Since it's my understanding that we can always modify the general plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if we modify the general plan to say that we would allow commercial use, and that passed by, what, a 3-2 vote? Then obviously this ordinance would then be applicable to allow someone with 4 acres to create a commercial use.
So if the council decided to create a commercial district in your general plan, then after environmental review, public comment, public participation, all of that, you would create the district, but you would also apply it somewhere within the city. And then those properties that had been designated as commercial could apply for a planned development district if they needed it, if there was something unique about the property that would benefit from this flexibility. But the first step would be to amend our general plan to allow commercial. Then you would have to change the designation of existing properties within the city, and then that property owner would have to come and request a planned development district.
But if your property was currently zoned as being residential and you decided to change it to commercial, is there any process you could go through to change that?
So they would have to come to the council and ask the council to create a commercial general plan designation, and that would be solely within the discretion of the city council.
So if they change the designation, then that's possible that somebody could, if with the sufficient number of acres of 4, could proceed in that manner.
Correct, but you would have already allowed commercial in the city. There would be there may or may not be any need for a planned development district because you've already created commercial properties within the city by general plan designation and designating certain properties that way.
I think what my concern is that I think that the ordinance as it's drafted doesn't designate that it's specifically applicable to residential, and that's the concern that I have, which I think, realizing that there are certain conventional zoning districts that we have that are all residential, it kind of impliedly says that, but one of the concerns I had is that I think it should just be designated as residential and just eliminate the whole issue about commercial. That's one consideration that I have. And then I have another question about, and a couple of these things I raised independently in conversation previous to the meeting with legal counsel and with the city manager, but in the way the ordinance is drafted in section 1E, it talks about the PD permit being issued with sole discretion, essentially with unrestricted discretion to the council. And it seemed to me that may be the wrong phrasing of PD permit.
Correct. That should be a PD district.
Okay. So that could be changed.
Yes.
And then the other concern that I had was the issue about 4 acres. And my concern was that if you had, 2 or 3 property owners on a street that totaled 4 acres, would that qualify, or should we designate in this that it has to be contiguous acreage? Because it seems to me that if you were in a cul-de-sac, and I realize it might be a big stretch, but if you were in a street or a cul-de-sac and two of the 3 or 4 neighbors got together and decided that they wanted to create multifamily housing or do something unique like this, is it important that the 4 acres should be contiguous or not?
So again, I go back to what's on top of the chart up here is that.
I can't see it. Unfortunately. I can see it, but I can't read it.
It's the general plan land use designation. So that's really what governs what can be developed, regardless of the zoning district that is there. If there's a density allowance of 1 dwelling unit per acre, that's what can be developed. If you have 4 properties that are an acre each and they want to combine into a 4-acre parcel and somehow reconfigure that 4 acres to 4 different parcels, they could do that under the R144. So the council would have the discretion to say, you can do that, but we're not going to consider a PD because we have a zoning district, R144, which is consistent with the one dwelling unit per acre density, which requires a minimum 1 acre parcel. The PD zoning district tool in and of itself does not change the density of the general plan. So again, your governing general plan tells people what type of development can happen where. Until that changes, the PD zoning has to be consistent with that. So people can't just say, I want to develop multifamily, so I'm going to use a PD zoning. No, it's the general plan which they start with, and that's under your control. So I'm sorry, take my finger away. You all have the ability
I don't want
to
to develop
decide.
it. I don't want to do that development.
You all have the ability to decide that the level or the intensity of development that's going to happen and where. So, and it's been yet to be decided at a certain site, but should it be decided that a higher density can happen, that general plan designation will be put in place first. And if we had a conventional zoning district that supported the type of multifamily that wanted to happen, you might have two tools to choose from, okay? Right now, we're creating a tool which might make it easier to consider a higher density development, especially in a case where you have a property that might have some environmental constraints, some other unique characteristics to it that, don't set it up as a one-dimensional site, which you can just, put all these units on without, being squished or, constrained or whatever. So really it comes down to, it's the general plan. So if you just say, whatever the general plan says, whatever zoning district I use has to be consistent with that, whether it's the R144 or a PD. So I think in answering your question, no. People can't just decide to aggregate parcels and change your general plan.
But this process allows the parcel, the elephant in the room is the La Hacienda property, and this will allow the ability to go outside of the current zoning that's created.
No, what will allow that is a general plan amendment application on file that will first come before the council. Should the council decide to amend the general plan to allow that higher density, then the next application to be considered, again, annexation, is the zoning, which would then support that density, which...
And just to make sure that it's clear, the Hacienda property application must include amendment to the general plan, and that is not part of tonight's discussion.
Right. Here's just my concern, and I think this is just my issue, and I really appreciate the work that's gone into this, because this is not an easy thing to draft, and it's not an easy thing to read on once it gets posted on Friday, to understand it over the weekend, to be able to vote on it this evening. And with no disrespect intended, and I'm sorry, I just pointed, but even the chart, which I think might be really helpful, because I still can't see it from here.
Do we not have copies of that?
I couldn't get a copy.
But the challenge is just making sure that we understand the process, because we're about to we're going to be considering something that's really thank you, it's really significant to the city, and I just want to make sure that if we do it, that we all really understand the process, because that's important.
So I think maybe again, kind of emphasizing your understanding that it really is in your hands to decide what the appropriate land uses are in the city. That's the general plan. That is basically yours to decide in consultation with the community. And so that's basically the constitution of the land use in Monte Sereno. And then, because you're a general law city, all your zoning has to be consistent with your general plan. Okay, that's, maybe can be a little more. So you're really just creating the tools through which you can implement your general plan. Okay, so we have some existing zoning districts, which are, pretty straightforward, one size fits all, or supposed to, but we all know that that doesn't necessarily happen or fit, all cases. Sometimes you get properties that have some environmental constraints, or you'd want to cluster some things. Not every lot is going to meet a certain minimum standard or can be set up to meet the exact setbacks. So, you kind of look at the general plan to guide how you're going to design or craft a new zoning district, whether you call it a RM 35, which is, or RM whatever, which reflects the density. Again, you can call it whatever you want, but it still has to be consistent with the general plan. First off, the density, the use, the density, and then all other applicable policies, whether it's tree preservation or noise standards, or, scenic corridor.
And I think what's really important to note, which maybe we haven't stressed enough, is this is an extremely common tool that I would say the vast majority of cities in California and around the country use for the reasons that Jeannie has pointed out, mostly to provide flexibility in situations where you need it. Environmental constraints, protection of tree groves could be, the property may have some riparian habitat that needs to preserve, and your standard setbacks, your standard height limits, and maybe if it's a subdivision, your standard minimum lot sizes wouldn't necessarily create the best plan. So at the end of the day, unless the general plan is changed, the density remains the same. It would just be how you distribute the houses, the streets, the sidewalks over the property would be different than you might normally see under a standard zoning district.
Another way to think about it, it's not exactly the same, but right now we do have the opportunity for variances in certain situations. And when projects come forward, perhaps they're on a steep slope or there's something physically unique about that parcel, you consider making modifications to our zoning regulations in that particular instance, because without it, they wouldn't be able to develop their property like others would. So you may give them a variance for a setback because of the way that the lot is oriented or the way that it's sloped. Similarly, with a PD district and then a PD zoning, a PD permit, you may look at an overall site and you can't meet the setbacks because of a riparian corridor or something like that. So you're modifying the development standards. You're not modifying the uses that are permitted, the density that's permitted. You're only looking at the development standards, heights, setbacks, road widths, those types of things. So it's really, if you looked at the chart, this is step 2 and 3, but your guiding document, your guiding principles throughout the city of Monte Sereno are the general plan, which is purely a residential general plan with some public uses thrown in there. That doesn't mean that can't change at some point, but the decision to change it is up to this council or future councils.
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
There. So if when we pre-zoned the La Hacienda property many years ago, we would not have needed to utilize this process if there was a plan that was submitted by the owner of that property to build it in accordance with how we pre-zoned it. Is that correct?
You might have needed it. We don't know because there was never an application submitted, but depending on the layout of the site, the constraints on the site, even at that density, they may have benefited from a PD. It's hard to say at this because we don't know what that would look like, but there may be slope issues. There may be setback issues. In order to get the 3 units per parcel that we have that's allowed, there may needed to be some variance from our traditional standards that a PD could have been used, but that was not a tool that we were looking at that time.
But it could have been done without a PD.
Yes. I mean, presumably, yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. So a couple of questions and even a scenario thrown in there for good measure. In terms of it being used as a tool, this would be applicable for, let's say, an owner who had a 4-acre plus parcel already, and they wanted to put 4 houses on it. But they wanted the houses configured in a way that the setbacks, they may have wanted them very close to each other because it's a guy who's building a compound for his family, and he wanted the houses to be closer together. So instead of trying to go for a series of variances or trying to do a bunch of lot line adjustments or splitting up a lot, he could apply for the PD designation at the same time that he would submit a plan, correct?
That's an excellent example.
He could, but again, it's to the discretion of the council
Right.
whether they thought.
If we want to allow it.
that, you know,
So-
yeah, because even though that one guy wants to do it for those reasons at that time, this all runs with the land. So really looking at the larger picture of how the, land division happens under, those densities, it's at your discretion whether or not.
And this is just a tool to allow us to do it if the council
Yes,
seems that or
exactly.
deems that it's necessary.
Exactly.
So then, kind of a scenario now. If 5, or let's just say a group of neighbors comes up with 4 acres of property, they would not be able to just go and ask for a PD designation because you have to have a single title on the land. It can't be separate and discrete properties, correct?
No, they could be properties, 4 contiguous properties that make up 1 acre, even though they're under different ownership. There's nothing that would prohibit that in this ordinance. And oftentimes, not necessarily in Monte Sereno, but in other cities, you'll see that where a developer will obtain rights to develop 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels, and they'll submit their entitlements, which may include a PD. They don't actually own the property yet, but if the entitlements are approved, then they would. So there's nothing in here that would prevent 4 property owners from doing it. Again, if each one of them owns a separate parcel, there's not a great benefit to them in getting a PD because they are going to have these separate parcels anyway.
Could they not request, would you make a request part of a lot line adjustment and they would merge all the parcels?
And typically if someone is presenting a plan development zoning, they'll also present with it a conceptual site plan, basically a conceptual development, which demonstrates why they would need that plan development and the differing development standards. So it's not just, I want a PD and I want, 10-foot setbacks as opposed to 30. Well, why? They present their proposal as to why they feel that district is more appropriate than a conventional zoning district. So, and the way they do that is through conceptual site plan, conceptual drawings, landscapes, elevations, all of that stuff. So you're pretty much seeing the development at the zoning stage to help you decide whether or not that's something appropriate at that time.
Okay, which kind of leads into the second part of my question, which is this is not a serial process. You don't get a PD first, then you come back and submit a plan. You have to submit it all at the same time.
Correct.
So this isn't, well, we'll see if I get it, then if I get it, I'm going to invest the money. Well, if I invest the money, but I'm not sure I'm going to get it, so they have to actually invest, and it's a pretty substantial amount of money. We're not talking about a few $1,000s. We're probably talking about a couple $100,000, right?
Yeah, and
For somebody to try to get one of these.
the council can decide to what extent they want to zone in different requirements. There are, in some instances, architecture can even be zoned in, given the location or the setting of it.
Well, I guess one of the things I just
So-
want to make sure that people just don't start going on fishing expeditions and really placing a burden on the staff to say, oh, well, you guys got this PD now, so let's all go out and try to get one.
No, it's pretty, and like Terry said, it's a pretty common tool in other cities. It's a full-blown development concept when it comes in. So there is some substantial investment, intellectual, probably monetary, that goes behind a PD. So I don't think you're going to be seeing people just, I want a PD. Well, if that's the case, staff is very well prepared to say you need to go back and develop a concept.
Okay.
And a pretty detailed concept, down to the preliminary grading and landscaping and everything like that.
Okay. All
But
right.
the PD permit process really gets to be more of a paperwork process, a refinement, an absolute refinement, because the real details of the development come at the zoning stage so that the decision makers, staff can review it, and the decision makers can really have some substance there from which they can make their decisions.
Great. Yeah, because I guess the other thing I was wondering is people go out and get a PD designation and say, hey, my property for sale, I got a PD. It's not going to happen. Awesome. Okay, well, looking at the list, Councilmember Turner is on the top.
Yes, I wanted to ask a quick question, please. If I were a Catholic church and I wanted to come into Monte Sereno, because I know there's no Catholic church here, or I was the principal of a school for special ed kids, can I apply for this PD? Do I have to apply for a PD, or do I get a special dispensation considering what I am?
I believe both of those uses would only be allowed in our public zoning,
I'd have to get the...
and we'll need to verify that. But again, you only are allowed to apply for a particular use if that particular use is allowed in our general plan. So a PD isn't going to let you build a power plant on Dave's Avenue because we don't allow power plants in the city of Monte Sereno. Similarly, you can't build a church in the industrial zone if we don't allow them already. So I'd have to look at our public zoning district, but unless it's listed as either a permitted use or a conditional use, a PD permit isn't going to help you.
Hey, Councilmember Rogers.
Okay. Well, I realize that we're not voting on an actual development here. That's not the purpose of this tonight, despite what people are thinking. But my question is, say the council votes no. You get 3 no votes. What happens? What happens next?
In terms of our settlement,
In terms of our settlement, in terms of going forward with anything that we do plan to do or not do with the hacienda going forward in the future?
after the public comment and after deliberation, if you determine that this is not something you believe is appropriate in the city, then under the terms of the settlement agreement, it's unclear. I don't believe, well, we'd have to go back and look at the application. Either the application would have to be modified to be consistent with a new zoning that needs to be created, or he could determine that we're not complying with the settlement agreement and the lawsuit would continue.
That's what I was wondering.
But I will say that the proposal for that property is also currently not consistent with the general plan designation for that site. That site's general plan designation currently allows 3 units per acre.
Right.
So part of the application is a general plan amendment. So it's possible, perhaps, that the application could be modified to create a zoning district, a general plan designation, a zoning district that would fall under this conventional zoning that he could be built within. But given the constraints of the site, the scenic corridor, the oak woodland, the slope, those types of things, I think it would be difficult.
I think so too.
Okay, are there any other council members who would like to ask a question? Okay, then at this time, I will open it up for public comment. And Malcolm Stewart, come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, thanks everybody for letting me speak tonight. So I'll try to limit my time, but there's a lot here, as you can tell from your discussion. So first of all, I would caution the council to move forward on this with extreme caution. Although Terry said, a lot of other cities have this, this just isn't any other city. I mean, it's all rural. It's a lot of, very quiet residential streets and everything. And you've got a history of divisiveness around zoning. I mean, there's been multiple councils have been dealing with multifamily, with different zoning issues. You see it come up, pretty much every council meeting. Someone needs a variance or something to weigh in on. And there's been, threats of lawsuits, a lot of NIMBY action. There's a referendum pending, like just a lot of things. So when I see what's being proposed here, I feel this is, Jeannie, is a bit ingenuous when you said this doesn't relate to the hacienda. I mean, the hacienda settlement has a PD process cited in it as part of the settlement. There's a couple statements in there, and you wouldn't be doing this, I would argue, if not for the hacienda settlement. And I know you've signed that settlement agreement, or I believe you've entered into it, you approved it, and you're going forward down that road. So you're looking to pursue that. But the same concerns that I voiced about that happening right next door to me, again, I voice about sprawl occurring down Highway 9 and the ability for this to really create a blank check that, it has to come in for a city council hearing, and it has to be consistent with the general plan, which there's been a lot of questions about, but that's not an objective standard consistent with the general plan. The general plan could be amended. Council could change, turnover in a couple of years, and something different could happen. And you can see as a customer on the side of watching the property next door to me go from 1 home per acre, county zoning, to now what's being proposed is 9 homes per acre, just like that. And it's been through multiple steps. We're going to do a zoning and then a PD and then process an actual application. But when the governing body deciding it is the same people, it happens just like that. It's like a train that's gotten loaded and going down the track. So the statements you said that these steps have to happen serially, and it's not just like considering one. When you take the first step, you're into it, and it's just going to keep rolling. So I would caution you to be very, very careful and consider a couple of things as you go into this. First of all, I'd say state there very clearly outright that there's no commercial that's available under this sort of a PD. There's no commercial today. And if you ever want to add commercial in Monte Sereno, there ought to be a referendum. Like, put it in there as a referendum item so that the council doesn't have the ability over time to change and twist and go in that situation. This isn't Mountain View. It's not at San Jose. We don't have any commercial. The second thing I would say is really
Malcolm?
yes.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yeah.
Since you probably can't see the lights up here anymore,
Yeah.
and our little gong isn't working, you've
wrap.
officially run out of time.
I'll wrap
if you
really
could wrap
quickly.
it up.
Yeah, I'll wrap really quickly. I would say I would think of putting in here some things that have to trigger referendum, like a zoning increase or a density increase over X percentage versus the immediate next door properties, so that you take it away from just a council's consideration and put it on for referendum. Think of some guardrails on what you're doing here. And remember, if you don't approve this, you still have the variance process to backstop this. So you could still hear every single thing that might have come up for a PD. You could still hear it in a council hearing after site and architectural reviewed it and address it as variances. Okay? That's it. Thanks.
Okay, Kathy Hall.
I'll talk first here.
Okay.
Our concern is that basically PD introduces multi-use. When you combine it with multifamily, okay, that high density, what you're going to end up with potentially is like an escrow office on the bottom floor. You're going to end up with a title company. You're going to end up, it won't be retail like a 7-Eleven, but it'll be something more like an office service, okay? And, you're opening and here's what I think you need to look at. Think about the cost per square foot for a tenant at the bottom floor. I mean, they're $3 a square foot for a retail space is not unusual. And, for a developer to come in, it kind of sets up an incentive. Hey, I can do multi-use here. I can have condos on top and downstairs have some retail, and it can be really fashionable retail. Okay, Saratoga has it, and it's very nice. But our concern is this PD, the way it's written, it's too vague. I mean, this is just a blank check. I think it needs to be tightened up. You need to really define what you're talking about as far as commercial. Just, Malcolm said rule it out. I think, have you ever been to Ladera? Okay, it's up there off of Arastradero. It's up past, it's Alpine. You go up to Alpine off of 280 and take a left. And it's very nice in there. They have medical offices. They have an organic grocery store. They've got coffee shops. They've got a few things like that. You know, if you take that and combine it with the housing that he's proposing, you're just going to end up with density. It could be very nice. But I just think the way this PD is written, it's just very vague. It's just way too open. In fact, I would even suggest if you're going to do that, you should meld it with the multi-housing and come up with something better and bring it before the people. You know, right now down there at the Hacienda Lands, and you can say, well, this isn't about the Hacienda Lands. Well, this is about the Hacienda Lands because, first off, there's not that many 4-acre places here. Like, here's a good example, and this isn't answered in this.
And
What
I'll
happens?
Just say you got about 10 seconds.
Okay. What happens if I want to develop a cannabis grow area in an ag space and I merge 4 acres to do it? This plan doesn't really answer that. Okay, there's a lot of unanswered in this PD. So I would urge the council to just table it. Let's move it forward. Let's maybe amend it, tighten it up, fix it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Kathy, did you want to come up and?
Hi, I'm Kathy Hall. I live on Oakhurst Drive. I'm not going to be as generous as my son was. I feel we have been too generous to Stanley. He's pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. He's running this city like Washington, D.C. We have done this many, many times. Where Mayor Inglis incorporated this in 1957, the plans were for no business. And I can tell you over the 52 years we've been living here that it has been declined and declined and declined. Okay, I'm not going to use up all my time with that one. If you do it, there'll be Airbnbs. My neighbor has a basement that's large enough to put in a computer company that he wanted to do when he built the house. And he will do it for sure. Okay? You're getting in big trouble doing that one. I suggest that otherwise people, 2 or 3 people could make one homeowner sell their company to one person, and that person can develop 4 acres if that's what you're putting the limit on, if they want to do a business bad enough. All right. I suggest that we bring this to a vote to the people of Monte Sereno in November. I'd like to know how much we owe Stanley in lawsuits, because that's what we're doing. We're paying off his lawsuit. And that's not going to go over well. We are definitely acting like Washington here. And it's not good. I suggest you put a parcel tax on every house in Monte Sereno and get the amount of money we owe Stanley, pay him off, and get rid of him. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't even use up all my time.
All right. And I do not see any more speaker cards. If there's anybody else who would like to speak on this topic. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public comments and bring it back to council. And as I'm looking at my speaker list, I don't see anybody. Oh, somebody just buttoned in. Councilmember Wolsheimer.
Thank you. I would like to ask our city attorney once again to state very clearly that we're not paving the way for commercial. I would like to hear that again, and maybe again after that.
So as we've stated several times, this PD process in no way changes what uses are allowed on a property in the city of Monte Sereno. It in no way allows commercial uses. It in no way allows mixed use. It in no way allows industrial power plants. All it does is give you flexibility in the development standards. That being said, if we wanted to make it very clear that it is only available in residential zones, we could modify section, so in the ordinance, it would be section 1A, and it's the section 10.05010. The planned development district is hereby established as a city zoning district classification in all residential zones. And then in section 10.05010B,
Can you slow down, please?
sorry.
Say it again.
So in under 10.05010A, this first sentence would read, "The planned development district is hereby established as a city zoning district classification in all residential zoning districts."
Or land use designations?
Or land use designation.
Yeah.
Thank you. In addition, section B of that section would read, "Every PD district shall be combined with an alternative base residential zoning district or districts." So it's very clear, it's only in residential districts,
Good.
and it in no way changes what uses are allowed in those residential zoning districts.
I would be in favor of incorporating that into the
Right.
ordinance.
Thank you. So let me also mention to my fellow council members that our initial test run is still with glitches. And so at this point, if you would like to make a motion, just please get my attention and say, I would like to make a motion, because our motion buttons are still not appearing. So we don't know why, and they probably will not be fixed before we're done with this agenda item. So let's see. I see somebody else is buzzed in. Councilmember Anstanding.
Thanks. I'd like to, I appreciate those changes on the designation, because I think it's important that it be clarified to be residential. I think I also have just a concern about the contiguous issue, and it's hard to imagine that something would be put together that wouldn't be. But it seems to me, as long as we're designating 4 acres, I think stating contiguous would be one of the things that I would suggest. And I think it's clear that in section 1E, capital letter E, that needs to be changed from PD permit to PD district. And I guess with those changes, my concern about this, and obviously, I mean, it's pretty clear. I think I voted and spoke at the last meeting where we considered the settlement against it. And so when I saw this, I kind of had a negative reaction to it for the variety of reasons that I've mentioned and discussed actually previous to tonight's meeting. But I realized that this is something that's different, and it may be highly regular in a lot of municipalities to be doing something like this. I'm sure we gave public notice appropriately, but something that's a change like this seems to me that it's and I realize we've got time constraints that we had. I just thought it was a little bit way too quick and doesn't give people the opportunity to really raise issues and have a greater concern. I mean, we didn't even have this until tonight, and frankly, that's unfortunate because I'm trying to understand this process. We've done houses forever, we've done variances forever, and I bet you if you went, polled 90% of the people and gave them a day to read this and said outline the process, they wouldn't be able to do it. And I know our professional staff can because you're well-trained and can do it. But that's my only concern about it, really, at this point with the amendments that we've talked about. I mean, otherwise, I mean, I know we got to vote on a process, so, you know, I realize it is what it is. Thank you.
Okay. Would anybody else care to speak? I do not see anybody. Member Rogers? Looked like you were thinking of one.
I'm thinking all the time.
That's good. Okay, so then I would like to just wrap it up. Again, I see this as a tool that could be very valuable in the future. And again, with the Hacienda application being submitted, I know that that's going to be one of the drivers of this. But again, I am in favor of getting this. We've talked about putting a PD together a number of times over the years, and we've now got a pretty definitive one on there. And one of the features of a PD is the ability to construct it specific to the projects that are being submitted. And so if we write this huge limited type of ordinance, then we're kind of defeating the whole process of having a PD. Then we just have a PD that we end up unwinding to be able to support a project that the city and the council feel would be good for a particular project. So as it stands now with the changes that have been suggested, I think we've got a pretty good PD here. And at this time, Siri doesn't understand what a PD is still, but I think I have a pretty good handle on it.
You can ask Alexa.
Yeah, we'll have to try Alexa. She's generally better at these things. Let's see. So, at this time, do we have any? Since our little motion button isn't working, Kirsten, during the meeting, we discussed that when you push the motion button, it really takes care of the whole, all the beautiful
Tells you what
motions
to
you
say?
make for us. So we're not trying to put you out of a job.
I'm going to say,
But
outsourcing.
we're going to have to call on you to give us what the motion would be.
So before we get to that, I just had one question. On section 10.08.130, the permit process. So this is the PD permit itself. Under B, it talks about the hearings, and there is a notice being sent out to 300 feet. And perhaps somebody, I think there might have been some concerns, and maybe to Councilmember Ann Standig's point, we may want to consider extending that so more people would be notified in the event someone applied for something like this.
Absolutely. From my standpoint, absolutely.
I would go for that one also.
Absolutely.
What would you recommend? I mean, citywide? I mean,
I don't know that I would go that far, but other cities that I'm well acquainted with for larger projects that would meet, I would say these parameters would go with a 500 foot, or I'd say at the outside 1,000 feet.
You go 1,000 feet on either side.
I thought I was supposed to say, if you're in 1 acre parcels, that doesn't do much.
So, again, as Terry said, there have been other cities through their public outreach policies that, yes, state standard is 300 feet, but they typically would go with a minimum standard of 5, but projects with broader community interest, they would go with a minimum of 1,000 feet for mailing notice.
Yeah, okay.
They might also.
Should not be
Yes.
decided here right
Excuse me, Mr. Hall, this is part of the ordinance that they're discussing tonight.
And I can also throw it out, they might also want to require that a community meeting be held, okay? Rather than, because again, mailed notices get to some people, but there are other ways to outreach, so definitely a minimum mailing.
Which is exactly what we're implementing with the Hacienda project. We're creating a web page. As things get moving farther along, we'll be using Nextdoor, our fairly extensive email list. I mean, the radius, the noticing is important, but in today's modern world, other pieces added to it are equally, if not more important.
Okay.
May I?
So, yes, Councilmember Wilsheimer.
I agree with some of the comments that were made, and I also think that 300 feet, with the size of the properties that we have in Monte Sereno, is not even close to being close enough. So I personally would be in favor of doing it citywide.
Okay. Any other comments?
It depends on the issue to do it citywide. We're not going to do it for everything. It's expensive.
Yeah. So 1,226 homes, that's the number I usually quote, right? 50 cents a stamp plus paper cost?
It usually runs about $1. How much is it per each one? Because we have to send it out to a service. I can't remember. We did a citywide notice for the.
So we're looking at over $1. So we're looking at $1,500 a mailing.
That's
Let's
not
just,
bad, but-
let's just round it up
We
a
don't
little
do
bit.
this every year.
Yeah, right.
No, I'm okay.
So I think we should say that a mailing to the city is justified. Councilmember Rogers?
Yeah, but I do think if we are going to mail out to the city, we may have to move the agenda to a different location,
Well, we're not going to,
depending on how many people like at Dave's Avenue, because if
And
we
that
mail it out to the city.
And that we can decide at the time of the hearing. I wouldn't want to I would not suggest memorializing that in any ordinance.
yeah.
No, but I'm thinking that's what's going to end up.
But yeah, and we've talked about when we have major projects like this, that we definitely extend the mailing out. So I think for something that's this major, placing it in the ordinance and making it kind of there is a good idea. So if we had a motion, if we wanted to make a motion, what motion would we make?
So if you wanted to make a motion, the motion would be a motion to introduce an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Monte Sereno amending Title 10 to establish a planned development zoning district and planned development permit process with the following amendments. Section 10.05.010A would be amended to read, "The planned development district is hereby established as a city zoning district classification in all residential zoning districts or land use designations." Section 10.05.010B would be amended to read, "Every PD district shall be combined with an alternative base residential zoning district or districts." Section 10.05.010C would be amended to read, "The PD district can only be applied to a site of at least 4 contiguous gross acres in size." Section 10.05.010E would be amended to read, "Under no circumstances shall the city ever be required to issue a PD zoning district." And Section 10.08.130 would be amended to read, "Upon receipt of a complete application, the committee shall cause notice of the time and place at which all interested persons may appear before the city council to be sent to the applicant and his or her agents and all property owners within the city of Monte Sereno, and shall thereafter hold a hearing at the time and place specified, and waive the reading thereof."
Okay. So moved?
So moved.
All right, so we have a so moved and we have a second. Okay, so any chance of the vote dialogue showing up here?
Got the motion.
Yeah, we don't have anything on our screen.
Okay,
Yeah, okay, so do you have all of it?
no, we don't have a vote button.
You don't have both buttons showing up.
Give it one more try.
No. Speak.
No.
Call for the vote. Maybe I need to say it clearer. Granicus, we're calling for the vote. Okay, Google.
No, that didn't help.
Darn it.
I don't understand.
I thought somebody would do it. All right, so can we please have a roll call vote?
Pretty funny, though.
What's hilarious?
Let me just do it randomly. Mayor Craig,
Yes.
Councilmember Anstandig,
No.
Councilmember Wilsheimer,
Yes.
Councilmember Turner,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
No.
Have all the votes.
Okay, so the motion passes.
Yes.
So that takes us to item number we're in new business. Oh, I got to scroll down. So item number 7, the tree preservation ordinance. And have another presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, and
Busy tonight.
it's just when it rains, it pours, no pun intended. So it's my pleasure to be before you again with information which we promised a few meetings back to come before you when the council requested some information on tree preservation. Okay. What just that? Okay. So staff put together a presentation, which basically is what you're seeing in your staff report also. What I wanted to do was to give you a brief overview of what the current tree preservation standards are in our city currently, some other way that cities look at tree preservation, and then maybe ask some questions as to what is of interest or that you might want to direct staff to look into if you feel compelled to want to suggest some changes or whatnot. So currently, the way tree preservation works in the city of Monte Sereno is we identify significant trees, and they're identified as oak or redwoods that are 20 inches in circumference when you measure it 4 feet above the natural grade. Also, what is defined as a significant tree is any other tree with a 25-inch circumference measured 4 feet above the grade. And thirdly, what's considered significant is any 3 trees, regardless of size, within a single calendar year. So, and I will tell you that I think is pretty unique to this city, is that third measure of significance.
So just real quick, that's two pieces of, like, that's 20 inches, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know,
Above the ground. Okay,
yeah, it's pretty small.
little show and tell there, sorry.
Yeah.
Just make sure I was.
And you'll see there are some other, when you get to, if you read through the staff report, cities vary in size, when they use size as a measure of significance. There are some cities that, they'll use circumference, some use diameter. A 56-inch circumference is in a perfect circle, an 18-inch diameter. So you break that in half, you're looking at about, an 8-inch diameter tree when you get down to 20 and 25-inch circumference. So it's not a very large tree by probably layperson standards, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not significant if it's a certain species. Some people say, regardless of size, certain species are significant because they're of native species or another value. So again, there's what Monte Sereno currently uses to define significant. This just gives you a sense of what staff has processed with respect to tree removals in 2017, and I was here the whole year. So at the staff level, and I'll go through, how we're able to do this at the staff level, we processed about 155 tree removals. Other tree removals that went to site and architecture that were that were larger were 33, and you can see that those were primarily oak, redwood, and there were a few pine trees. The remaining ones, were 91, so it was a good number of trees, but the staff level ones, well, it doesn't really go there. At the staff level, the reason we're able to do that is because there are some exceptions. And did I put those in here? The exceptions in the city's current ordinance are if you are deemed to be a hazard, unsafe, whatnot, and the city manager, a lot of times those are ones that are overhanging public right-of-way or of imminent danger of falling onto the residence or home or whatnot. The other ones are that a tree is deemed not viable. Though that's really what we use when somebody has a dead tree. So these are trees that would be accepted from the tree permit process. By policy, trees that aren't viable or what we've determined to be dead or diseased and really have no chance of coming back and having a healthful existence, we still make them fill out a tree removal so that we can verify that they're not viable, so that it's not just in the hands of, the resident who may not be well-versed in tree health. But that's at no cost. And then the third exception is when there's some conflict with utilities. And those a lot of times could be cases where, the utility lines above this town doesn't require the utility companies to come in and get a permit for removal of those. Also, if there are underground utilities, sewer lines, that it's clear that tree roots or the growth of the tree has impacted that, staff can, see some sort of evidence and be able to approve the removal of those trees. So those are the three areas that are accepted from permits in the city. And that's pretty standard. Cities will vary the process. Some, leave it up to the homeowners to decide that. A lot of cities will require some evidence to be able to verify, but at no cost to the property owner. There are cities that, though, do require utility companies to come through and get a permit, regardless of whether or not they're under the utility lines. Again, I've kind of seen half and half. Some cities allow the utilities to manage their easement areas and the vegetation within those areas. Others want to kind of keep a check on it. The next few slides, again, just show some examples of how some other nearby cities regulate. Some have much smaller size. Some focus in on species. Some get really specific as to the height and the type of trees. Some are larger. One city, again, because of the volume that they dealt with, realized that, do we really care about palm trees? Any type of palm tree? Are we going to require the, people to go through a hearing? They've created processes which they still need to get a permit from the city, but it's at no cost, and it's really just through verification that they meet certain thresholds, whether it's insignificant size, it's up against utilities, it's in close proximity or too close to a home, or it's of a species that really is, its removal is not going to impact the urban forest or may even be a benefit because they're invasive species. Some, when they do allow that, they also just include an automatic tree replacement of 1-to-1. So there's a real mix of how communities address tree preservation. There were some that do, again, identify, and I know it was brought up at the original discussion, eucalyptus as being a tree that, is unsuitable or undesirable. So they don't require a permit. There are some communities that still require a one-to-one because they still see that as a contributor to the urban forest. Some, see it as a detriment, so they're not going to punish the homeowners by even requiring a one-to-one replacement. So it really varies by community. So, with that, there are some opportunities for change. There are some opportunities, I think, to make some of our provisions a little clearer for residents to understand it. As a staff, the 3 trees per calendar year is, like I said, unique to this town. There are a lot of people who want to re-landscape, and they might have these small citrus or really small ornamental landscape trees, and technically, if they take 3 of those out in any one year, they're subject to a permit. So again, that's kind of an odd requirement. And although some may not be going by it, the fact that you have it on the books, technically, it's still a requirement out there. That's one opportunity. Clearly, there's an opportunity to clarify the dead tree or viable. What does viable mean? It could be dead or diseased. And sometimes dead is not easy to determine either, So a lot of times staff could make the call, or unless they feel the need to get an arborist statement or something. Because there's just, we don't have a biologist, we have a planner. And so sometimes I do need the help of that. So having the opportunity to request that. What else? Like I said, identifying some unsuitable or undesirable, and also, whether or not you want to codify just an automatic one-to-one replacement at a minimum size and or a minimum type or species. A lot of times we'll require native species. Well, there's a broad list of native species. So you can codify those to make it easier for the property owners to understand what's in front of them. So with that.
So I think we'd like to take questions, and then we were going to, if you have specific questions, but we would like to go through the list of questions and get some feedback from you. And then this would allow us to take some time to craft some changes or additions and then come back to you with recommended changes to the tree preservation ordinance. And the city council, of course, is, if you think most of it is fine, that's fine, and you just want some small things done, that's fine too. But Jeannie and I, when we talked about this, decided we wanted to open it up a little bit more in case you had other ideas.
Okay, we have a list of speakers, and we'll start with Councilmember Anstanding. A list of 1.
The let me go back, because to hit the speaker, you got to lose the.
Yeah, you got to lose that.
Yeah. So here's the concern I have, and it's more procedural. It's not. I think anything we can do to protect the trees is great, and it's more from a legal perspective. But it seems to me that there's a permit process that can be granted without going to the Site and Architecture Commission. And then we have a process that allows somebody who wants to appeal, they have the right to file an appeal with the city council. But once the first permit is granted, they've got 10 days to appeal to the city council, because it could be a neighbor that says, no, don't take it down. There's nothing wrong with this tree. And by that time, 10 days, and by the time the hearing gets held, the tree's gone. And this doesn't preclude that. That's the first.
Well, the current process, if you get if this request goes to the Site and Architecture and they approve it to be removed, that permit is not final and cannot be acted upon until the appeal process is concluded.
It doesn't say that in here. It doesn't say it in the ordinance. And that's what my concern is. So if there's a 10-day waiting period and it allows somebody to, a neighbor or whatever to complain about the fact that a permit was granted, maybe I missed it, but that would be great. That solves that problem because you want to give people an opportunity to complain if a permit's been granted. The other question, and again, the appeal can only be taken if the commission is granted or denied. But if the city manager or his designee grants the permit, then there's no appeal period. And so I think that's another loophole. The other point that I would raise is that in the section relating to penalties, we should add that anybody who violates this, there should be an opportunity for a court to award attorney's fees to the prevailing party. And if you put it in the ordinance, there's a chance that we could get that. Because obviously if we're going to go after somebody and take them to court and for violating the rule, they ought to pay our attorney's fees for doing that. So those would, otherwise, it looks pretty good to me. I mean, I didn't go out and start measuring trees on my lot, but I think it's pretty good. So those would be my comments.
Okay. Councilmember Rogers?
Well, my problem with this is I'm just not qualified to make a decision. I don't know trees. We've got all these things on here, opportunities for change. Anything that I vote on is going to be based on absolutely no knowledge. I mean, we hold up a little thing and we see how big it is. I mean, shouldn't we ask an arborist to help us with this decision?
Well, I think that tonight this is all about just general direction.
But even general direction, I don't know enough about trees.
We certainly can, go back and spend some time and give you some more details on what, we're native, what are not native, what, we would recommend we keep, what we take out. We certainly can do that. So what I would suggest is we compartmentalize that into one direction to us, is to come up with a more specific recommendation on trees we want and trees we don't. Would that work? I mean, we'll take that as a general direction.
I guess, I don't know. It's hard for me. I mean, most of these things you have an understanding. I understand the housing element, and I understand their general plan. I don't know trees. The other thing is, I do agree with Marshall, but the penalty section I thought was on here was kind of weak. That needed some looking at.
Okay. Councilmember Wolsheimer.
Thank you. What I would suggest is maybe that we split up this process in two steps, where we make some quick changes, add a list of undesirable trees, for example, that can be removed without a permit or with a free permit, and that we take a little bit more time to look at these 5 questions, which are, I agree with Councilmember Kurt. Sorry, brain freeze. Some of these questions are very complicated, and we need a little bit more time, but we can make some very quick changes, I think, by adding a list of trees that we prefer not to have in the city, if it's possible at all, and eucalyptus is one of them. These high palm trees with a 100-foot high trunk and then the little 3-4 leaves up in the top. Trees that are a danger physically or a fire danger, things like that. So maybe split it up into a short-term and a long-term fix.
Councilmember Turner, I didn't see your name on the list, but I figure we'll just, okay.
Trees are trees.
All righty.
There you go.
In that case, whatever you guys vote on, I'm in favor of.
So then I'll kind of get on the bandwagon of eucalyptus trees. That's been, I think, just living in an area where there happen to be a number of them and watching them fall on cars. And just in the time I've been on the council, I've seen about 6 or 7 branches fall, denting roofs and busting out headlights, and luckily nobody was hurt in any of these branches. I mean, we had one fall at our house, and by the time I got done cutting it up, it took up three of our regular waste, and I cut it up pretty small, so there wasn't a large amount of wasted space, but just this, what I thought was a small branch, ended up being a couple of 100 pounds, and it fell from about 30 feet high. So they will damage houses, and they're also with the, I really feel that our new normal for water is going to be 1 season of decent rain and 5 seasons of drought. And eucalyptus trees really are not the kind of trees you want to have in a drought season, because they suck the water from the surrounding areas, because all they do is just mop up water. That's what they were brought here for, was to get water and to grow like weeds so that the paper plants could use them. And they have no business being here. And I understand there was a movement to exempt them, but only exempt them with the replacement of a similar type tree, which I think we should not have any type of tree replacement. I think our canopy is excellent. I don't think the removal of eucalyptus trees in our city will do any damage to our urban forest here, or our rural forest, however we want to consider it. And the rest of the comments that were made were excellent. I mean, we've never really had to impose any penalties, but I think it's good to have it in this day and age, since people tend to want to push the limits of the law these days, and they're more than willing to see what they can get away with and maybe tighten up a few things. But other than that, I mean, I looked at questions 1, 2, and 3, and I think we've been pretty specific in terms of our design guidelines, what trees are native to the areas now. So I think we've given people a pretty good roadmap of what kind of trees should be planted when they're doing some development from scratch of a property. And live and dead trees, I've always thought that staff is pretty competent and they can go look at a tree. I mean, I know there was one tree that there was one site permit that we took a look at where the tree had a big gaping rotted hole almost 2/3 of the way through, and it was about 3 feet high, and we almost didn't. A few of us said, well, we're not going to approve the site permit unless you get rid of that tree, because it was pretty obvious that it needed to go away. I know there's been some contentious battles over trees, but in my time here, I think we've been pretty good on tree removals up until the time Site and Architecture took them over. And from what I've seen, they've been doing an excellent job of them also. So those are kind of my number one thought is eucalyptus trees. Anything we can do to move those things out of here is good.
We could certainly go ahead.
Yeah. So Councilmember Anstanding.
Yeah. Go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think we could go 2 ways with this. We could keep it simple and make some, minor adjustments, for mainly for the reason this was asked to be put on the agenda, and maybe a couple other things. Or we could go something much more in depth. And if we are going to do that, staff would have to employ an outside consultant to assist us with this, because neither Jeannie nor I nor anyone on staff is an expert in this area. And we certainly can do that, but we would have to, set a budget, which I can figure out approximately what that would cost, and then we could, go through the process of finding someone, getting a contract together, and getting them to work on it. And we certainly can do that, but it would require us to back up a little bit and work on that process, and then come to you ultimately with recommendations somewhere down the road.
Okay. On another topic, I think that what's missing in the permit process and the application process is the process of removal and takedown. And I think that needs to be designated. For example, I know on a piece of property that's right next to my house, the neighbor they bought the house and they were there. They probably have several 250, 300-foot eucalyptus trees. And when you say eucalyptus, it tripped my mind. How those might be taken down, and the process of that needs to be reviewed carefully, because there's all kinds of issues that could be created as a result of that. And I just think that it should be part of the permits process, that somebody says this tree needs to come down and here's the plan that we have to take it down. And I realize on some trees, it's probably pretty simple, but on some really large ones that are right on property lines and could create issues, it would be really helpful to have something like that, I think.
Jump in if you want, but I would, maybe staff is not prepared to, review any sort of tree takedown management plans. Again, we're not in that area. There are licensed tree contractors who, through that licensing, should be following a certain protocol.
Maybe we designate that it has to be a licensed tree removal, because they don't all have to be licensed.
That could be a good idea.
I think I understand the issue. We'll try to figure out a way to do it. I don't know that you'd want it in your municipal code. It may be in, the tree permit application requirement, something like that, where it's not necessarily codified, because it won't happen all that often, and you don't want to make it too burdensome on a normal situation, but would give us some flexibility when you have something unusual.
It's the unusual part, case that I'm worried about, where the tree comes down improperly on somebody's house and they sue us, the city, for not properly supervising and permitting the process.
The only concern, though, is once you do set up once the city sets up a process, we've now stepped into that situation, and there is some potential liability because we told them how to do it, and if the how results in some liability, they could look to us, as opposed to here's your permit, go remove it, follow the guidelines of your arborist or whoever you're hiring. Then we've stepped back from that. But let us look into that a little bit more.
That just seemed like a issue.
Yeah, one other point on the attorney's fees, it actually is already provided in our code, not in the tree ordinance, but in chapter 5.05, which is our code enforcement section. It enables us to recover attorney's fees in any administrative action or judicial action for violation of our code.
Oh. Thank you.
We can repeat it, but it is in there.
Okay. Are there any other comments? We don't need to have any motions or any votes for this.
Well,
It was just a discussion.
Correct, but I do want to repeat back. I think I heard three things we'll look at, unless there's a general consensus for us to move forward with looking for a consultant to do a much bigger rewrite. I guess I would first ask, is there a consensus to move forward for us to employ a consultant for a major rewrite?
No.
That would be generally no.
Fix the roads.
Okay.
Leave it alone.
I'm not sure the cost of this would, be that much of a burden on our finances. Okay, so short of that, I heard, I think, three things. We need to potentially increase the penalties, was one.
I like that.
We don't have a list of undesirable or unsuitable trees, but we could start that and list eucalyptus as one of those trees. And then three, look at, I think it's, as Kirsten suggesting, a policy of us, in certain circumstances, making sure that the proper individuals are doing the job to, make sure that it's done properly. And what I can do is, I did not issue these types of permits, actually, in the last city I worked in, but they issue a lot. I could inquire with them and some others exactly how they go about that.
Can I add a fourth?
The appeal, clarify that.
Yeah, fourth
for the
branch to
appeal-
that issue, which is
Yeah.
the appeal process.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the root of all
That is
evil.
the root of the problem. Was there any interest in looking at this any three trees, regardless of type, that you need a permit?
No. Could the ordinance be written in such a way where it would say list of these trees as determined by the city and may be changed at any time? Or are we going to have to say, well, we want to put tulip trees on there and have a city council vote on tulip trees?
You'd have to change it.
You have to change it.
The
yeah.
city council does?
Yeah, because it's in your ordinance. Yeah.
Change that part of the ordinance, though? That's what I'm wondering.
You want to be the one doing that?
I think the,
Address, I'm not going to just do it myself.
I think the issue of the number of trees is a little confusing. If you limit it to, let's say, 3 trees per year, you can remove 3 trees in December and 3 trees in January.
Yeah, I think the issue is
Calendar
it's
year.
3 trees
Any size.
of any, it's the size. There's no size limit. So if you want to cut down 3 trees that are, this big, you need a
Technically, you
permit,
need a
technically.
permit. But, we're not going out and monitoring, and quite honestly, I can't keep track of how many trees in any calendar year and whether it's in
Right.
December. So,
Yeah.
so it's a regulation that, for all practical purposes, is difficult to.
So let's remove
So I
it.
think we're recommending that be specifically removed.
I think it's a good, thank you, I didn't want to bring that one up.
Regulations you cannot enforce, you shouldn't have.
Probably a good idea.
There's a law in Oregon that you cannot take a bath with oranges in the bath. Believe it or not.
Fiscal year or calendar?
I don't know how they would enforce it or where it came from, but
Do you
things
want
you
them
cannot
to?
enforce, that shouldn't be on the books.
Okay. Item
Okay, are we done with this agenda item? Great. So item number 8, the housing annual report.
Move to
Coming.
approve.
Coming.
Have a motion to approve the housing report.
Wait,
Second.
wait, okay.
Turn a timer on, please. Give her 2 minutes.
I think we all read this. We're all good.
Thank God I don't have to do this that often. So, again, it's my pleasure to be before you for this last item, which is our annual progress report on the housing element. I think, where are we here? Oh, this is it, I'm sorry. I got the wrong one here. So as you see in our staff report, I think what's of note is that last year, staff permitted 12 accessory dwelling units, which is up from the 5 the previous year. I think one reason may be that now they no longer require to go in front of site and architecture. Again, per the ordinance that council approved over a year ago, consistent with state law, they now only have to get a building permit. So again, I think that's a real incentive. The other item, I think, to note relative to our progress with our housing element was another ordinance that you all saw a year ago in March, which supports the streamlining of the development process. We worked with the ad hoc committee of site and architecture and identified some areas that we could remove from the requirements of site development permit. Predominantly, no more interior remodels. We don't look at those at all. We don't, not that we don't care what goes on in your house, but we don't care what goes on in your house or how you configure it. So, and really just looking at those projects that have some significant mass or design or whatnot. So those, I think, are really the 2 areas of note, is the increase in accessory dwelling units to 12. We also approved 4 new homes, I think up from 2 the previous year. And again, I think it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are next year. But with that, staff does recommend that the City Council accept this progress report and direct staff to submit it to the state by our April 1st deadline.
That was great.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Seeing none, I will entertain motions.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? So the annual housing report has been accepted, and thank you, Jeannie. You
Good job,
piled it all
Jeannie.
on for you tonight.
It was all in, all in favor?
All in favor? And so that takes us to committee and commission reports. You already shook your head, so then I guess I'll start on this side. Nothing?
Nothing.
Nothing. Yes.
I have one. I attended the Silicon Valley Animal Control meeting. We are considering paying off our CalPERS liability. There's almost enough money on the reserve, except for Mountain View. Mountain View is a little bit behind because they joined later than the other cities, so they're a little bit behind in building up their reserve. But we're close to making a decision on that. And actually, the 4 cities that form the Animal Control Authority are supposed to discuss this with the city managers. See if they agree, if everybody agrees to move the reserve from one bucket to another bucket and pay off CalPERS. The other piece of news is good. Our contribution to Silicon Valley Animal Control will be reduced next year, probably from 34,000 to 22,000. And this is purely based on the number of calls made in the city. People are taking care of their animals, they're not getting out, so they don't have to be caught. So fewer calls. Whereas in Mountain View, their contribution is going up by 19%.
Wow.
Wow.
So a lot of work there for animal control.
Got these beasts running around there.
Thank you.
What about the coyotes?
I don't know. What about the coyote?
I've
That's
looked
vector
so
control,
into
though.
the coyote issue.
That's
There
not
is
animal
nothing
control,
you can
yeah.
do about the coyotes. You cannot trap them, you cannot move them. And if you put it on next door, people will
Yeah, they'll
start saying all
bite your
sorts
head
of
off,
nasty
yeah.
things to you.
Since the person who, no. That's it, thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Turner, nothing? Okay, so, I warned you guys last meeting that this was gonna happen. So let's go with the quick one. Silicon Valley Clean Energy has lowered their rates. So before, we were 1% cheaper than PG&E. As of April the 1st, the rates will be 6% lower, so 5% additional. So if you're in the Silicon Valley Clean Energy program, which hopefully everybody is, you will be getting a little bit more money back to buy lattes with. Okay.
I was just referring to somebody else who said crumbs.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Sorry. The way I'm your alternate, so I got
Yes.
all the emails also. The way it was written was a little bit confusing. You could interpret it as if the rates for the clean energy have been raised 6% less than PG&E's rates, but are still going up.
Yes, that is true.
Okay.
So
it's not a
PG&E raised their
decrease,
rates
actually.
9%. And instead of just going with an 8% raise, we went to a 6% raise.
Okay.
I was taking
So that's
the marketing
somewhat
approach.
misleading, but
Yes.
Wow, this is like Washington.
Okay, so it's not crumbs.
I was elected chairman of the finance committee. I guess that's what happens when you show up to meetings again. And Monte Sereno is now, I don't know if you were going to mention this, but we are now utilizing the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. We are on the Green Prime. So we are walking the walk and talking the talk. Cities Association. So I'm going to just cut to the main event of the thing there. And we talked about, let me get to it. I was just here. Where did it
It's
go?
already passed, Burton. Oh, it went off.
We passed, we
There was a
passed the
motion up that
committee,
passed
commission.
5-0.
Or am I being voted to censured? Thank you. All right, so we did have a nice long discussion on regional housing. I know this has been something that we have discussed. It's been brought up by members of the public every time we talk about the hacienda, and it's one of the things where people are saying, we need to wait, we need to wait, we need to wait, we need to see what's going to happen with regionalization, and this is going to be our savior. And I guess I'm going to just start off and say it's not going to be our savior. We had Laurel Prevetti from Los Gatos and Dwayne Bay from ABAG basically come in and present the months of work that they've done on this. And the way that regionalization works, in case anybody doesn't know, is that you still get your numbers. ABAG still says, Monte Sereno, you get X number of units. Los Gatos, San Jose, everybody gets X number of units. if all of the jurisdictions that are inside a particular region vote to form this region, adopt a set of rules, hold regular meetings, and then after each city gets their independent number, negotiates with each other, and then as a region sends back a comprehensive list, then ABAG will accept that. But if any city says, no, I don't want to do it, then everybody's back to their own numbers. Okay? So they don't say, the Silicon Valley region, here's your number. Still, every city gets their own number. Cindy Chavez's efforts were brought up. Nobody's heard anything about what she's been doing. So I would say, for the most part, nothing's happening there. There were a number of people that brought up a number of items, one of them being that regionalization should not be used for dumping your allocation to someplace that is out of your location. And again, we kind of get picked on because I kept bringing it up, but they don't want Monte Sereno giving their housing to Milpitas. And they don't want Milpitas taking that. The housing needs to stay in the area. So we should be working with Los Gatos, we should be working with Saratoga and Campbell if we want to try to see if there's a way that we can get our number reduced. There was no pay to play. Nobody in San Mateo is currently paying, and they don't want to see cities saying, okay, Los Gatos, we'll give you $50,000 per house you take off of our hands. There's not going to be a spot market for this. This isn't cap and trade. And I think if they see that happening, then they'll pretty much shut this down no matter what. There is a method already to bargain with cities. You basically call up and you say, hey, Laurel, do you guys need any housing? Or, hey, Steve, do you guys need any housing? We've got some extra housing. None of the cities are even close to meeting their RENA numbers to begin with. So nobody seemed terribly excited to take on anybody else's. And in terms of trying to see where this committee wanted to go, it was begrudgingly voted to continue studying this. And the recommendation was look at this again in a couple of years, so maybe around 2020. So that's kind of the bad news, but that's as quick as I could make it. So with that, I will go to council member comments. We'll start on the right-hand side this time. Councilmember Turner, nothing.
No comment.
Nothing. Oh.
Just real quickly, it would be really helpful when we get some meaty issues that come up, like the zoning process, and actually even I hate to say it, but I haven't even read this, and I thought of actually pulling it just so we could read it, because it's pretty important. We have fiduciary duties about our financial condition, and I'm not suggesting I think there's anything wrong or inappropriate that's there, but it'd really be helpful before we voted to approve something like that we really have had a chance to see it. And perhaps if I had come over more often to pick up mail, I might have had it. So I take responsibility for that. But if something like this does show up,
It was in the packet, was it not?
Yes.
Yeah, it was.
it was in the packet on here.
Been in the
Yes.
electronic packet, yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Then
I missed it also.
Then my fault that I withdraw my comments. I
well,
should
but-
read my packet more carefully.
But along with your comment, because I think it's very valuable, whenever there's going to be a presentation, I would like, at least for the council, to get the presentation so that we're not seeing it for the first time. And if we have any questions on the presentation, we might be able to forward them to you and maybe come up with an idea of a visual or some questions that you may want to change the slide to get that question answered up front.
Yeah, and this chart was great. This is helpful to look
And
at.
I apologize, I thought we had copies of that.
Can you send those out?
I'm sorry?
The audit is.
No, I thought we had copies of this.
Oh.
No, after I created it today, I just made that thing, and then, quite honestly, it slipped my mind to make copies and give it.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. Councilmember Rogers, any comments?
No.
City managers report.
I just had two things. One is the constant reminder that we need to promote our Keep Kids Alive 25 campaign at every opportunity we possibly can. the youth commission is, when's their event? If it is going to happen?
It would be this Saturday
Okay.
to distribute the
And does it seem
decals.
like it's still going to happen, or?
I don't know. I have only about 5 residents that have requested decals at this point.
We were trying to set up with the youth commission a much larger outreach effort, but it's not been going particularly well. But my main point is, we still have a lot, and we're looking for every opportunity we can to, get them out into the community and make sure they're get to them. And we're posting it on Nextdoor. What else have we done?
The youth commissions, they've made some signs to put in their yards. We've pushed it out to Dave's Avenue School for their newsletter. They've sent that out last week or the week before. The school districts are helping us. So wherever I can put some, then I do.
Can we post these someplace? I mean, is there someplace is there a suggested place to post
And your
something like
garbage
that?
cans.
Garbage can.
That's okay?
Yeah.
That's where they go, yes.
That's
And we
right.
have instructions that go with it.
That's right.
Where can we get some?
Right here.
Yeah, we have tons. Actually, I purposely left them out tonight. There's
I'll get them.
I'm starting to see more of them throughout the
I'm starting
city.
to.
If you'd like to take some, you're absolutely welcome.
yeah.
I'll grab some more. I've got them on most of my garbage cans. I'll put them on all.
They're here somewhere. I brought them so we
We
would
have
have them
them.
tonight. So I just want to make sure that we're, keeping that in our mind, that this is an important thing, and we've bought all these, and we should really get them out as much as possible. The only other thing I was mentioned is, everyone's familiar with the RIDE, the Reach Your Destination Early. It was our senior transportation pilot program that we're part of. The city manager in Saratoga is organizing it. There's through the League of California Cities, there's what's known as the Helen Putnam Awards, and there's the Helen Putnam Award for Excellence, in different categories. So I believe that, I know that city manager's office in Saratoga is going to lead an effort to put together an application for the RIDE program to receive an award, and we intend to participate in supporting the application. So I just wanted to let you know those 2 things.
Okay, with that, I adjourn the meeting. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Burton. Thanks.
Good training.
Yes.